for the purpose of progress, to a priest or a prophet, playing God in the process.
We've noticed something over the years, something that breaks our hearts and that we think breaks the heart of God too. It's no longer the norm that individuals or families have had a positive experience with church, or any experience at all. So many of our neighbors and coworkers and friends and family members don't have any interest in the local church altogether. And we want to change that. Why? Because we believe when it's working right, the local church is the hope of the world. We believe that there really is no organization with as much potential to change hearts and transform lives and empower the next generation and make a lasting difference in the world as the local church. And so with God's help, we want to be a light in what may seem like a dark world. And we want that light to start shining right here in the St. Croix Valley. And if you think you're too far gone, we'd love to be the ones to tell you God will always leave the light on. So whether you've been in church your whole life or have never stepped foot in church before, we're excited to open our doors to you and to welcome you to the place where real people and a real God meet. We're glad that you could be with us today.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Midcurrent. My name is PJ. We are so glad that you have joined us today. If you are a member here at Midcurrent or you come regularly, we would love to encourage you to slide to the middle, slide forward. That would be fantastic. Get comfortable, get cozy. We have a very short 4-hour service planned for you guys today. Not really. We have an awesome action-packed 60 minutes, and so get comfy, get cozy, settle in, and we'll get started shortly. Welcome.
few days ago, it was Good Friday, which is funny because for everyone who was there that day, very little seemed good about it. In fact, today, that very same day that we remember as Good Friday is sometimes referred to as Black Friday. Not Black Friday as in the shopping frenzy that happens the day after Thanksgiving, but Black Friday as in the day the world went black. The day that darkness seemed to swallow up the entire earth during the moments that Jesus breathed his last breath on the cross. To his followers, this was the unimaginable and unthinkable sign of defeat, of loss, of failure, of discouragement, and ultimately of hopelessness. I wonder how many of you have ever felt a similar sting. I wonder how many of you have felt a similar darkness swallow you. Who knows? Maybe even right now, you're experiencing the agony of defeat, the pain of loss or of failure, or the paralyzing strike of doubt, discouragement, or a loss of hope. If that's you, you are not alone. In fact, we're really glad you're here today, and we've got some good news for you.
A great light dawns in Galilee. Some say madman, some say king. A wonder-working rebel priest, Jesus Christ the Nazarene. He knew well what it would take to free us all from sin and grave. A perfect man would have to die, and only he could pay that price. Friday's good 'cause Sunday's coming. Don't lose hope 'cause Sunday's coming. Devil, you done, you better start running. Friday's good 'cause Sunday's coming. So we let those soldiers take him in, as his friend betrayed him with a kiss. And there before the mocking crowd, like a lamb to the slaughter, didn't make no sound, and carried that cross to Calvary, and he shed his blood to set us free. As the nail went in and the sky went dark, the redemption of the world was on his heart. Friday's good 'cause Sunday's coming. Don't lose hope 'cause Sunday's coming. Devil, you're done, you better start running. Friday's good, Sunday's coming. Then he breathed his last and bowed his head, the Son of God, and man was dead. With bloody hands, tears on their face, they laid him down inside that grave. That wasn't the end. That wasn't the end. That wasn't the end. Let me tell you what happened Upon the throne, all heaven sings to him alone. We watch and wait like a bride for a groom. Oh, choo-choo rise, he's coming soon.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Midcurrent and happy Easter to you. My name is Stan, and I am the pastor here, and this dapper-looking young man.
My name's PJ. I'm a member here at Midcurrent, like many of you here today.
Yeah, we're so thrilled to have you here, and we are excited to be the ones to share the good news with you that Sunday is not coming. Rather, in fact, Sunday, this very significant Sunday in the life of the church and our church, that Sunday is actually here now, today.
There's something, Stan, that stood out to me in that video. There's a line there that said, "You are not alone." And I found, for me personally, any time in my life when I feel that I've made a uniquely terrible mistake or I am uniquely damaged in some way, whenever I can muster the courage to share that with other people, more often than not, I get a response of "me too."
Yeah.
And that has been one of the greatest gifts that I've been able to receive in my life.
Yeah, there's something powerful here about knowing that we are not alone in the journey that we are facing. And that's part of the good news of what we celebrate here today. That's what makes, I think, the Easter story good news for all of us, no matter where we're coming from, no matter kind of what journey we've been on, no matter what it is that we're walking through right now, no matter where we've been or what we've done, no matter how many times we've been in church, no matter how many Bible verses we know, the good news of Easter is that the power that raised Jesus from the dead is actually the same power that is available to and lives inside of you and inside of me. And that is ultimately what we are here celebrating today. And we are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us. And in just a second, I'm going to turn things over to the band, and they're going to lead us in a time of singing for all of us. We really continue to tell this story. We continue to sing about why it is good news for all of us here today. So I am actually going to invite you to stand right now, and I'm going to turn things over to Brian and to the band. And I know that they would be thrilled to have all of you sing out with us here today. Once again, we're super glad you're here, whether you're on site or tuning in online, and it's our privilege to be able to wish you a very happy Easter today.
Took our place. You got a redemption. You open the way. The day gave your life. It seemed to fear in our eyes, but the stone rolled away as you walked out of that grave. Let this place he run with praise. Why do you look for living among the grave? Jesus lives, all the earth sing out. The power of death has been broken, and this changes everything. The God of perfection became sin. The God of salvation changed everything. The day you gave your life, it seemed to failure in our eyes, but the stone rolled away as you walked out of that grave. Let this place he run with praise. Why do you look for living among the grave? Jesus lives, and all the earth sing out. The power Because you live, our song will never end. Because you live, now we can live. This changes everything, changes everything. Because you live, now hope begins. Because you live, our song will never end. Because you live, now we can live. This changes everything, changes everything. In this place erupt with praise. Why do you look for the living among the graves? Jesus lives, all the earth sing out. The power of death has been broken, and this changes everything. In this place erupt with praise. Why do you look for the living among the graves? Jesus lives, and all the earth sing out. The power of death has been broken, and this changes everything. Our God, a firm foundation, our rock, the only solid ground. As nations rise and fall, kingdoms once strong now shaken, but we trust forever in your name, the name of Jesus. We trust. We trust the name of Jesus. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever, forevermore.
Easter baskets and Cadbury eggs and frilly little girl dresses and death. Pastel cakes and ham dinners and Easter grass all over the house and grave clothes. We come to Easter celebrating Jesus in springtime, sort of. It's easy, desirable even, to skip over the part of Jesus' life that was a bloodied body given for us in death. I'd rather not spend time thinking about embalming spices or the emptiness his followers felt when they realized he was not coming down off that cross triumphantly. That may be true of all of us. My son Leif asked me yesterday, "Mom, is it possible to be addicted to happiness?" He's 10. "Yeah, it is, honey," I said. "Sometimes we don't want to spend time on the hard parts of our lives, so we chase only the things that make us happy. We don't make time to sit with the hard things. And our lives have plenty of hard things, don't they? Wounded hearts, busted up relationships, shallow bank accounts, depression, anxiety, all kinds of things that we cannot control. We have our own darkness, our own dead and dying things. But the good news is that that's not the whole story, or it doesn't have to be. Jesus did come down off that cross triumphantly, conquering once and for always every evil, every dead thing for us, for all of eternity. Death was arrested, full stop, which means our deaths and the dead things in our lives are not the full story. They aren't the truest thing about us anymore. If you're brand new to Jesus today, he wants to give you the freshest, newest life possible because he loves you. And if you've been with Jesus a while, he wants to infuse life back into any dead places that you might have because he loves you. Death doesn't win anymore. The dead things don't have to triumph over us anymore. He is alive, and we can be too, both now and forever. Won't you sing with us?
Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope and no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested, my life began. Ash was redeemed, only beauty remained. And my orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet and my feet rose to death. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new now. Life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new now. Love begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom, faithfully bore. He canceled my debt and he called me his friend. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new now. Life begins with you. darkness rejoices, so heaven and low. But then Jesus arose, our freedom in hell. That's when death was arrested, my life began. That's when death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new now. Life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new now. Life begins with you. Oh, we're free forever, we're free. Come join the song for the redeemed. Yes, we're free forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, we're free and forever we're free. Come join the song for the redeemed. Yes, we're free forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested, my life began. When death was arrested, my life began. I love the words of that last song. It says, when death was arrested and my life began. Easter really is the day that made new life begin for you and for me. And there's nothing that makes us smile more here at Midcurrent Church than hearing stories of people who have found new life and hope and worth in Jesus. And today we want to share one of those stories with you now. Please be seated.
I grew up in a small town where there were just as many bars as there were churches. It was very fitting because the only message I ever seemed to hear in church was that it was my fault I was a sinner and that I needed to try harder. It was like sitting in those pews was the price we all had to pay for the bad choices we'd made each week. Many of the people I was surrounded by growing up either knowingly or unknowingly reaffirmed to me that I wasn't pretty enough, didn't have enough money, and wasn't worthy of love. So I went through life believing those things. I gravitated towards relationships with basically anyone who was willing because I didn't think I was good enough to be choosy about who I surrounded myself with. When relationships got tough, instead of communicating my needs, I simply escaped and didn't look back. It was almost like I pretended they never happened. I especially ran from a relationship with God because I figured, what was the point of trying if I was never going to be good enough? When I was in my 20s, I still felt very isolated, but I figured once I had the right job and a good marriage with a house and kids, that maybe then the constant void that I felt in my heart would be filled. Well, all of those things came to fruition. I worked in the finance industry, married an amazing man, and had 2 adorable children. I was literally never alone, and yet had never felt more isolated in my life. One day, I found myself at a women's networking event where I met Erica Carlson. She told me that she and her husband were planting a church in Hudson, and although I wasn't immediately planning on attending, we found ourselves walking through the doors of Midcurrent not long after that. I have to stop right here for a moment and admit that I did have other intentions. Truthfully, I wondered if getting connected with Sten, Erica, and their new church would help me professionally at the time. I'm not proud to admit that, but it's true. And yet, what I've realized is that I don't think that even mattered to God. I can't help but think He just needed me to walk through those doors. And if I did, He could get my attention. And that's exactly what He did. I had never understood the messages I'd heard in church, but the ones I began hearing at Midcurrent made sense. They got me thinking, and they were practical. Instead of teaching me that I was a terrible person who God hated and wanted to punish, I started hearing the message that I was loved. I learned that of course I'm a sinner. We all are. That's why we were given the ultimate gift of Jesus. But Jesus didn't come to this earth to guilt trip us. He came to free us from our guilt and pain and suffering. He died to take it all on himself so that we wouldn't have to endure any of it. Erica Carlson ran MC Kids at the time that my daughter started in the preschool room on Sunday mornings, and I'll never forget the lines her team used for teaching the kids. God is a good God. He's in a good mood, and he is not mad at you. It was so freeing to realize that I was worthy of good relationships with God and with others in a way where I could honestly be myself and still be loved, or even be loved especially because I was being myself. As a result, I've been on a self-love journey these last few months, and I know that sounds cheesy, but I'm learning that we can only love others with what we already have inside ourselves. We can't show the love of Jesus to others until we believe that it is something we are worthy to receive. I am worthy, and so are you.
What an amazing video that Krista made there for us. And stories like these are what Midcurrent is all about. And frankly, this is why we give back to Midcurrent. This is why our family gives back to Midcurrent. Every cent that we give back goes into changing people's lives. It goes back in introducing people to Jesus. It goes back into creating places where real God and real people can meet. So thank you so much for all of you that faithfully give back to Midcurrent. If you call Midcurrent home, you can give back in the usual ways that I talk about every Sunday. They're up on the screen behind me. If you're new here or visiting us for the first time today, we expect nothing from you. Your presence is a gift to us today. But what I would encourage you to do is pick up one of these connection cards, either in the seat back pocket in front of you, or you can find them out at the welcome desk, and fill this out and drop it at the front desk, or you can drop in the collection box up back. And I can speak from personal experience, moving here 2 years ago, that this card changed my life and changed the life of my family. So I would recommend, if you're looking for a place to connect with people, for a place to call home, that you fill out one of these cards. I would also invite all of you to come back with us next Sunday. We're starting a brand new message series called This Is Us. We are going to share all about how the heart beats here at Midcurrent and what we're all about. So it's an amazing opportunity to come back and connect with us. So I invite everyone here to come back and visit us next Sunday. So the only thing left for me to do now is bring back Pastor Sten Carlson for our really special Easter message.
It was in 1815 that France and England squared away in a battle you may be familiar with. It was the Battle of Waterloo. The French troops were led by Napoleon Bonaparte, and the British troops, on the other hand, they were under the command of General Duke Wellington. And as the battle raged, and particularly as it came to an end, all of England anxiously awaited the news of the outcome of this battle. And if you can even imagine this will just sound horrific to some of you, they didn't have Twitter or Facebook. They didn't have 24-hour news cycles reporting the news on TV or online, streaming to every device, to every person on the planet, right? And so in these days before electronic communication, significant developments and news of great occasions had to be passed on primarily by word of mouth. And so in this particular instance, England relied on signalmen to pass the message along from one to another to spread the news of the outcome of this battle all throughout the country. And so on June 18 of 1815, a signalman was placed on top of the Winchester Cathedral. And he had one job, which is to keep a watch out over the sea, because on board a British ship at sea would be another signalman sending news to shore of the outcome of this battle. And so when the signalman atop the cathedral received the message, he was to pass it on to another signalman on a hill down the line, and that man was to pass it on to another, who would pass it on to another, and another, and another, until the news of the battle was relayed all the way to London, and then ultimately to all of England. At long last, a ship was spotted out at sea through kind of a dense layer of fog that was beginning to settle on the English Channel. And the signalman on board the British ship sent the first word of the message to the signalman on shore. He began to spell out Wellington, was the first word, and then a few seconds later, the next word came through, defeated. And at that moment, the fog that was settling on the English Channel, the fog began to close in more and more, and it swallowed up the ship, which could no longer be seen from the shore. And so the tragic message, Wellington defeated, was sent all across England, and sorrow and gloom began to descend over the countryside. This was not the news that anyone had hoped to receive. However, a few hours later, the fog began to lift, and the signalman on board the ship out at sea was continuing still to send the message to shore once again. Wellington defeated, it read again. And yet this time the message included two additional words that were not spotted the first time around. This time it read, Wellington defeated the enemy. The first time around, they could only see half of the message, but this time around, they got the whole thing. And now the full news of the outcome of this battle went racing across the country again, but this time the entire nation rejoiced. Friends, I begin today with this little bit of history for you because this story has the most striking parallels with the story of Jesus and his death on a cross. At the moment that Jesus drew his last breath on that cross, every single one of his followers plunged into the most profound sorrow. Jesus had just experienced the most tragic death, and the message began to spread to all of Jerusalem and beyond. Jesus defeated. And yet, 3 days later, the fog lifted, and the stone was rolled away, and the full message could finally be delivered. Jesus defeated the enemy. The full message was broadcast to the entire first century world. Jesus defeated death. Jesus overcame the grave. And what is intriguing to me when I read some of the finer details of this story of Jesus' death and his resurrection is that God, too, seemed to have used somewhat of a signal, you could say, to alert the world to the outcome of Jesus' death on the cross. And that same signal, depending on your point of view, sent two drastically different messages. Take a look at this with me because I don't want you to get only half of the message that God is trying to send to you. So we're going to look together at the New Testament book of Matthew. And in case you're curious, the book of Matthew, it is just a letter that was written by one of Jesus' followers who was named You guys are so smart, okay? Matthew, he was one of the guys who wrote about. That's all that this letter is. He was one of the guys who wrote about what they saw and what they experienced and what they witnessed during Jesus' life on earth. And so Matthew, he records this stuff, and he writes about a lot of things, but he writes about the very moment, too, that Jesus was crucified, the day that we call Good Friday. Take a look at what he says. He says, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all of the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? The scene was bleak. Jesus' followers looked on, and they looked up in disbelief. Here's what Matthew writes as he continues. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. Right? He throws in the towel. He says, that's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. Verse 51. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And get this, the earth shook. The rocks split, and the tombs broke open. An earthquake strikes and signals to the world the significance of the death that everyone has just witnessed up on the cross. The whole earth and the entire natural world, it seemed to be responding to the horrific and the tragic event that had just taken place. Jesus' followers scattered in fear and in sorrow. Jesus had been defeated, and their hope had died along with him. But that wasn't the end of the story, right? 3 days later, I told you the fog lifted and the full message would be delivered. This is what catches my attention. The full message would now be delivered. Interestingly, it would be accompanied by the very same signal. Fast forward to Easter morning. Matthew writes this. Early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Suddenly, there was a great, what? Earthquake. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. Here it is again, an earthquake. God is using, it would seem, the natural world to send a message of the supernatural activity that was playing out right before everyone's eyes. Now, just to be clear, earthquakes were actually not that uncommon in this specific region due to its placement on top of a major seismic rift. But Matthew records this in a way that makes sure that we understand that this was no coincidence that an earthquake shook. He says there was a great earthquake for an angel. It's a preposition for. There was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down. For meaning like because of or as a result of the angel and the message that he was there to deliver. Historians and scholars suggest that it is the earthquake that the angel of the Lord used. It wasn't just a coincidence that it happened at the same time. The angel used, they suggest, the earthquake to roll the stone that sealed the tomb away. The same signal that triggered devastation on Friday is now used to testify to an event of far greater and of divine magnitude. Okay? Now, I want to caution us here not to create too picturesque a scene, right? Because of all the happy vibes of Easter, I think it's tempting to imagine, this scene. I think it's tempting to assume that it was just a really kind of peaceful moment. I think it's tempting to picture that on that Sunday morning, the sun is shining and the birds are chirping and pretty little Easter flowers are blooming and the soft rumble of the ground, right? The soft rumble of the ground that rolled the stone away also kind of shook loose some of the jelly beans that had been stuffed in the plastic Easter grass that was packed around the tomb that day. The Bible doesn't make specific mention of it, but I'm not sure that there can be an earthquake. I'm not sure the ground can shake so violently that a massive stone is pushed to the side without it being a terrifying, jaw-dropping, knee-buckling experience. Now, these kind of natural phenomenons are scary things. I remember as a kid that when we had just moved to the plains of Illinois, we now had to be worried about tornadoes. Okay, I was scared. This is a true story. I was scared of thunderstorms. I would have to come home from friends' houses if I was doing a sleepover. I would have to come home. My parents had to come get me if it started to thunder and lightning. So tornadoes were a whole new deal. The first tornado warning that we ever experienced, my older brother and I kid you not, we went down into the basement. We built a barricade with moving boxes that we still had laying around, and we put laundry baskets over our head. These kind of natural phenomenons are no joke. They are destructive forces. An earthquake is no different. I don't think that there is a calm and a peaceful way to experience one. And that's why it's interesting to me that on Easter, what is understood to by many, what is understood to be a tool of destruction was used as a tool, as an aid in the resurrection. What is understood to be a force that destroys life was actually the force that played a part in springing new life up out of the grave. Friends, if we zoom all the way out to you and to me today, I can't help but want to suggest that the same thing is true. That the things that, I can't help but wonder if this is true of us, that the things that we assume, that most would assume were meant to destroy, very well could be the very same things that snap us back to life again, right? I think Easter, this story is teaching us that when we follow after Jesus, here's what I want us to understand, that sometimes it is the things that shake the ground beneath our feet that actually break the chains that pin us to the ground in the first place. Right? Why would a tool of destruction be used as a tool in the resurrection? I think this is, I just can't help but wonder if this is true, that sometimes it really is those things that shake the ground that are actually the things that break the change. Folks, I want you to understand that Easter is teaching us that even when the ground is shaking, God very well might be still working. And I don't think many of us are naturally wired to make that connection. See, I think that most of us, we have a hard time understanding. We're not very good at this day. We have a hard time understanding that something good could come from something hard. Right? We have made, in our lives, we have made comfort and ease and pleasure our ultimate goal and our number one priority. And so if it's hard, we think surely it's not good, right? As soon as something is hard, or as soon as something is sad or uncomfortable or challenging or painful, we assume, well, surely there is no way it could be good. But here's the problem with that. When this is our line of thinking, we're really only getting half of the message, and from half of the message, we're making our determination that it wasn't good, and so we run away from it. We try to change whatever doesn't feel right. We change jobs, or we change hometowns, or we change houses, or we change spouses, or we change churches, all in an effort to prevent the ground from ever shaking too much under our feet. But let me tell you once again, what I think we see playing out on the hillside of Golgotha is that sometimes it truly is the things that shake the ground under our feet, that shake the very foundations that we have built our life on, that can be the very same things that break the chains and that roll away the stone that kept us buried in the ground in a grave of our own. Friends, when the ground shakes beneath our feet, and it's going to shake. If it's not shaking now, if it hasn't ever shook in your life, I'm telling you, it's going to shake sometime. The ground is going to shake, and when it does, here's what I'm saying. Let's hold out for the entire message. See, folks, this is good news for all of us. The good news of Easter is that it demonstrates for us as clearly as possible. It demonstrates emphatically for us that God is in the business of turning tragedy into triumph. This was the message at the resurrection, right? That a cross could be used as a tool of love and of life-saving rescue, right? This was the case. Tragedy turned into triumph. This was the case at the resurrection. And the very same thing has been true throughout all of God's activity in the world for generations, right? Think about this. God delivers Daniel from the lion's den when everyone around braced themselves for the gruesome death that they assumed was awaiting him. Didn't happen. God split the waters of the Red Sea into two when the Israelites were running for their life and they had hit a dead end and they had enemy forces in hot pursuit. Tragedy, oh no, what are we going to do? It turned into triumph, right? God elevated Joseph from the Old Testament, right? He elevated Joseph to the second highest position of leadership in all of Egypt, and he used Joseph to amazingly and skillfully lead all of Egypt through a devastating 7 years of famine, and Joseph actually was right at the controls, saving many of the lives of the people in that day. He's number two. He's leading everybody, despite the fact that Joseph ended up in Egypt in the first place because his brothers hated him, and they left him to die in a pit, and they eventually sold him off as a slave to a bunch of travelers wandering by. And while he was a slave in a foreign country, he was wrongly accused of assault and thrown into prison. It doesn't get more tragic than that. But you want to know what Joseph said to his brothers when all of this was over and when they stood face to face almost a decade or so later? You want to know what he said? He says to them, "It's all good, boys. You meant it to harm me, but God meant it for good. For the saving of many lives," right? Because he was in that place that good came from. He says, "It's all good, boys. You meant it to harm me, but God meant it for good." I think Joseph, in all of his faithfulness to God, I'm not sure he could have predicted that this is exactly how it was going to play out, but I think in all of his faithfulness to God, I think he knew something deep inside of him. He told him that even if the ground was shaking, even if his world was rocking, God would be and could be still working. It's amazing. His prison sentence, he shouldn't even been in prison in the first place. His prison sentence would be the thing that gave him an audience ultimately. Skipping over a lot of the story, but his prison sentence is the thing that would give him an audience with the one man, Pharaoh, who would ultimately set him free and set him up to lead courageously in Egypt at a time when Egypt badly needed a leader the most. I think Joseph had to have known deep down in his bones that he served a God who could and did and would turn tragedy into triumph. So he never waved the white flag. Folks, I want to make the very same appeal to you today. Let's not be so quick to wave the white flag. Let's not be so quick to move on in defeat. See, I wonder right now for you here today, maybe some of you watching online, I don't know, but I wonder where it feels like. I wonder where it feels like the ground is shaking underneath your feet right now. I wonder what it is that feels like, or what it is that has felt like in the past, what it is that feels like tragedy in your life right now. I want to tell you, it may not be the end of the story. This might only be the first half of the message that God is sending you. Okay, now let me be very clear. I'm not trying to make light of tragedy. I'm not trying to make light of anything hard in your life. I'm not saying, hey, I promise you, it all has a happy ending. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't always have a happy ending, at least not on this side of heaven. Okay? Some of it is just the unfortunate result of the the broken world in which we live, but for all of the rest of it, this side of heaven. I mean, there's good news because there is ultimate triumph in heaven despite the tragedy we experience here. That's good news. That we could shut it down right there, right? But for all of the rest of the tragedy that we experience, I just don't want that tragedy. I don't want anybody to get mixed messages. Might be only half the message. I mean, what if the tragedy, what if the hardship, or what if the struggle, or what if the defeat, or what if the failure that we experience today? What if it was the very tool that God would use? What if it was the very tool that God was using, not causing, but what if it was the very tool that God was using to pave the way for triumph that was indeed possible on the other side? None of this is easy. Please don't. I'm not making light of any of this stuff or saying if it's hard, man, get it together. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm trying to get us thinking is what if? What if tragedy could become triumph? What if the job that you lost was a necessary tragedy to steer you onto the path of God's true and ultimate calling for you, so that one that you would have never discovered in the first place if the ground had never shook under your feet? What if the breakup that you just lived through, as much as it rocked your world, what if it was the necessary tragedy that God would use to help you discover, number one, that you are worth so much more, number two, that you have so much more to offer someone in a relationship, right? What if, this stuff is hard, but I'm just thinking out loud, what if the death in your family, what was the ultimate tragedy that God would use somehow to bring new life? What if it was the tragedy that God would use to reunite a family that was in desperate need of writing a new chapter together? What if the tension in your family right now, I know there's no tension in any of your family and any of your in-laws, right? What if the tension in your family right now was the hurt that God would use to alert you all to the potential for healing? Right? What if your recovery journey, as shaky as it felt, as shaky as it feels, as shaky as you feel in the midst of it, what if it was the pain that God would use to end generations of addiction in your family? What if God was using you to break the chains and break the patterns of sin and addiction that had riddled your family all the way up to you? What if the darkest chapter in your life, what if it became the survival guide that someone else needed to make it through the darkest time in their own life? Midcurrent, when we live as Easter kind of people, when we stake our claim on the claim of Jesus and his victory over the grave, here's what I'm telling you. Here's what I want to remind you. We always have to wait for the fog to lift. Tragedy, disappointment, failure, loss, heartache on Friday is never the end. It might just be the first half of the message that God is sending. It might just be the first chapter of the story that God is writing for you. And so we never, when our eyes are fixed on Jesus, when our hearts are aligned with Jesus, when we're following after Jesus, we never give up, because Sunday is always coming. Let me pray. God, this is a day that we celebrate wildly, God, the triumph over death, the triumph over the grave, the triumph over the cross, God, triumph ultimately over what so many assumed was tragedy. God, we give you thanks because here's what we know, that the power that raised Jesus from the dead, the power that raised Jesus to life once again, is the same power that is available to each of us here today. Resurrection power, God, the power to spring us back to life again. We give you thanks for it, God. We give you thanks for your incredible love for us that we see so clearly in Jesus and in his death, and most of all, in his resurrection. It's in his name that we pray here today. Amen. Folks, the truth is this promise of a God who turns tragedy into triumph, it is a promise that is made most perfect for those of us who put our faith in Jesus. For those of us that do believe that the power that raised Jesus from the dead is the power that lives in us. It's for those of us, it's made most perfect for those of us who have said yes to him. And so if you have never in your life said yes to Jesus, you'd never given your heart and your life over to this resurrected King, I want to invite you to do that, to consider that today. In fact, right now, in these last moments before you walk on out of here today, I want to invite you, and I want to encourage you to take a moment and to maybe pray silently to yourself a prayer that sounds like this: Jesus, I trust in you, and I understand fully your love for me that meant you would give up your life for me. And in response here today, I give you my life and I give you my heart, and I say yes to following after you. If that's a prayer that you are praying today, we would love to know, because we would love to be cheering for you wildly, and we would love to come alongside you in any way we can. In fact, I'd love to have you do one of two things. Number one, I'd be thrilled to have you just come tell me that. You don't have to say anything else other than, Stan, I said yes. If you don't want to come talk to me face to face, here's all you got to do. Send an email with 3 words: I said yes, to yes@midcurrentchurch.org. And man, we would be so thrilled to follow up with you. So please do that. Please take advantage of our prayer team, who is off to my right, if you need prayer for anything before you head on out of here today. And other than that, let me just say one last time, Happy Easter to you. We hope to see you right back here at 9 or 10:30 a.m. next Sunday for the first week in our series, This Is Us. Happy Easter. God bless you.